Welcome to the Stokastic MLB Strategy Show. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. I'm here with Adam Scherer. You can find him on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. And this show is sponsored by SoRare, which is a digital collection of digital trading cards and an NFT-based free-to-play baseball game. Had my heart broken once again on SoRare this week. I was in the money all week until the final day on Sunday. Also had Shane McClanahan. Decided to start Shane McClanahan over Noah Syndergaard, and apparently that was a bad decision. Shane McClanahan was terrible against the Yankees, off to a rough start there, but get back to it this week. Adam, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Shane McClanahan had a pretty entertaining interview after that start. I don't know why I enjoyed it so much. He was very intense and just basically open about how poorly he pitched. But I don't know. It was a pretty entertaining interview.
I haven't watched it yet. I'll have to check that out. I'll have to also check out this interview from Kwame Brown about whatever Kwame Brown said about John Morant. Sounds like you enjoyed it.
Yeah, 5-minute rant from Kwame Brown on John Morant. Yeah, it was enjoyable.
I feel like he's been a good shit talker in the past.
Oh yeah, Kwame Brown can talk.
Yeah,
he doesn't hold back. He says what he's thinking.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out because I've always enjoyed a good Kwame Brown shit talk. Keith asked, Neil, do you have your fantasy cruncher breakdown video of how you set it up? I don't have it offhand. I think, Adam, you're out tomorrow. Is that correct?
I am off tomorrow.
All right. So tomorrow I will do that once again. I don't remember the actual date of when I had that video. I can probably find that for you though, Keith. If you DM me on Twitter, I'll send you that video. But otherwise, yeah, I'll be going over it tomorrow. And it was really just one of the days that I've shown multiple ways that I set up fantasy cruncher because I do it a little bit different each day. While you're coming in, by the way, I didn't say this at the beginning, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that notification button so you can get alerts when our shows go live. I was watching the show yesterday. I noticed that EMAC really good at telling people to hit the like. I sometimes forget to tell people. It really is important that we get you guys to hit the like.
EMAC extremely good at doing ad reads and suggesting people hit the like button for sure.
He's great at it. He's just he's a pro, and he's like, Terry's not going to give you his home run pick until you hit that like button. I'm like, oh, we got to do shit like that. Apparently, I just forget to do it, and then he's doing all these great sales tactics. But please do hit the like button, guys, because I always forget to ask. So now I'm remembering. All right, we've got a 10-game slate to talk about here, Adam. Do you have any overarching thoughts on this slate?
No, just walked into my apartment like 15 minutes ago, so we're seeing this for the first time.
Beautiful. Well, I don't think that's going to hinder us at all. We should check on the weather, I suppose. One thing we should look at before we just break it down, because that's obviously not going to be accounted for. Let me check out. Okay. No real weather concerns. We have a Coors slate once again, so that's going to be, always a factor on any given slate. If there's a Coors slate, it kind of changes the dynamic of the slate a little bit. But we will jump in, break it down game by game. Let me pull that up. All right, first game. Oh, we've got Yankees at Blue Jays. I do not have a Yankees starting pitcher listed. Adam, do you have any idea who's starting?
Looks like Jimmy Cordero followed by Brito. So nothing DFS wise.
Okay. All right. So no pitcher for the Yankees, and then we've got Alek Manoah on the mound for the Jays. Any interest in Alek Manoah?
Yeah, he's still only $7,900. He's had some issues this year, and obviously it's a pretty dangerous matchup going up against the Yankees as well. But still, just 4 implied run total is relatively low. He's got a track record of being a good pitcher. Has struggled this year, like I said, but the price tag has accounted for that, and it's not like he's shown no signs of life this year. It's just that, he started out really slowly. He's only struck out 16.8% of hitters. He's walked 13% of hitters. Both of those numbers are really bad. 5.76 FIP is terrible. 1.3 home runs per 9, really bad. But, again, this is just a situation where, should you be somewhat concerned about Alek Manoah because of how he's pitched so far this year, given that, we're a month and a half into the season? Sure. I think that there's certainly reason not to be overly confident. But at the same time, we do have a track record of this being a pretty solid pitcher. If you go back to the start of last season, he struck out 26% of righties, sub 100 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. He's always had some issues with lefties, only an 18.5% strikeout percentage, 170 expected ISO allowed to lefties since last year. So, guys like Anthony Rizzo, Jacob Bowers are going to look fine regardless. And obviously you can always play like Aaron Judge, but when you look at this Yankees lineup and you think about what Alek Manoah has been as a pitcher in the past, most of the guys in this lineup that you're concerned about are right-handed. their projected lineup only has 3 left-handed hitters: Torres, Judge, LeMahieu, Bader, Volpe, all right-handed. The guys that you're outside of Rizzo, I guess, that you're most worried about. So if you assume that this is just a blip on the radar for Manoah to start the season, and that he's still the pitcher he has been so far in his career, it's a dangerous but decent matchup for him. If you assume that he's the guy he's been this year, then you wouldn't touch him. But for me, his price tag being $7,900 mitigates a lot of that risk, because this is somebody that when he typically would be 8,500, 9K, 9,200, somewhere in that range. So I do still think that he looks okay here. He's pulling 17% ownership, 13% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. Just keep in mind that his results so far this year do not warrant much reason for confidence.
Do his results so far this year give you confidence in playing the Yankees bats against him? Let's just that's my transition into. Can you tell me about your interest in the bats in this game?
Yeah, I think the Yankees are interesting in tournaments just because they're getting 3% ownership, 4% chance of being a top. Wait, this is the wrong slate. They are interesting in tournaments just because of the volatility we've seen from Manoah. They are pulling 1% ownership, 2% chance of being the top stack. We have them 4th from the bottom in top stack percentage, which is kind of surprising, but again, it's a slightly below 4 implied run total. The reason I think they're somewhat interesting in tournaments, though, is that they are getting 1% ownership, and Manoah has been bad this year. Now, granted, even this year, he's done a pretty good job limiting power to righties. 138 expected ISO, only a 17% strikeout percentage. So if I can only play one side, I'm going Manoah, but I do think that it being a good hitter's park, the Yankees having a lot of good hitters, and them being 1% owned is at least reason to consider them in tournaments.
Okay, and what about the Jays against this? It sounds like it's a bullpen game.
Yeah, so Johnny Brito's been starting for them this year. It looks like they're using him as the follower today, which not that I would really have interest in him against Toronto anyway, but even less now.
But then how about Toronto against Yankees?
Yeah, I mean, Toronto bats look fine. 5 implied run total. You typically, again, you don't really like these bullpen games because you're just seeing a different arm each of your first 2 times through the order typically. And then you're going to get Brito probably going through the order once, maybe twice. So it becomes difficult just because, hitters do better their second and third time seeing a pitcher, and this limits how many times they see the same pitcher. So that's why these spots can be tough, but it is still a good park. It is still a very high upside offense for Toronto. It's not like it's a bad matchup. They are middle of the pack, 5% chance of being the top stack, only 4% ownership. So, probably not going crazy getting to them, especially because they're relatively expensive also, but not a bad spot.
How would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Manoah 1, Blue Jays 2, Yankees 3, Brito 4.
Okay. Peter's saying that lineup generator is not working. It was working for me just a minute ago. So if anybody, Peter, if you can tell me what you mean by that, what's not working, because I could just be missing something. I just glanced at it, but it seemed to be working for me. But please let me know if it's not, because then I will have to flag somebody before we go over it later on in the show. All right. Boss Bro says every Coors slate is always a fade for me. I would disagree with that approach.
For you this year.
Yes. Has it really? Has it been? I mean, I feel like there have been a few games where Coors has gone off, but I think in general that's true. It has not really worked out. But in general, I feel like I don't like taking those kind of hard stances, because there are going to be slates where Coors is going to be. You're going to see the Rockies are 7%. I think we just saw it last week. Rockies at 7% ownership with a 12% chance of being the top stack, something like that. So I wouldn't take that hard of a stance on it. But would you agree with that, Adam?
Yeah, it's the same as everything else. You're comparing chances of success to ownership, and chances of success for Coors are going to be higher than most other spots, but ownership is sometimes going to be higher. And when you get those really, really popular Coors slates, it's typically going to be a good idea. And again, this changes based on slate, but generally when Coors is really popular, you're going to be able to find other good offenses that are not as popular as they should be. But the spot that I've been attacking the Rockies a lot this year, and it hasn't worked out, but it's nothing that I've been unhappy with. There have been so many slates where I'm able to get the Rockies in Coors with a 5.2, 5.3 implied run total at 2% owned, 2-3% aggregate ownership. As opposed to the visiting team typically has all the ownership because they're on the road, they're facing Rockies pitching, Rockies hitting sucks. But it all depends. I mean, I still think it hasn't worked out for me. If you were to just stack anytime you get a 2 or 3% owned team in Coors, if you stack them, you're probably making money over the course of a year.
Yeah, most likely over that.
Yeah, so I mean, again, it's just all it's all slate dependent. You're just by having a hard and fast stance about really anything in DFS as opposed to breaking down every individual slate. You're just creating a situation for yourself to make mistakes.
Right. Yeah. It's probably, if you're going to take a hard stance, it's probably not the worst stance to take of just always fading Coors, but I just don't like taking those kinds of,
I mean, but the
I
thing
always
is,
do this.
you shouldn't even view it if you want to take that stance. Don't even view it as I always fade Coors. View it as I never play the most popular team.
Yeah.
Which again isn't
largely the stance he's taken. Yeah.
Right. Which again, like isn't a great hard and fast rule either. But there's plenty of times where Coors just isn't that, like, it's popular, but it's not that popular. Like there's a lot of slates where the road team in Coors ends up being similarly owned to the top, three, to the second and third team as well. But yeah, like that's it more so like the games where, we had talked before where like DraftKings was pricing Coors Field ridiculously low, and you were getting like 30+% aggregate ownership coming into, like, I think it was the Pirates in Coors. Like at that point, it has nothing to do with Coors. It's just I don't play 30% owned teams.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to go with a hard and fast rule, I think it should more so be like I just don't play the highest owned team.
Jake Swell says taking hard stances is how you win GPPs.
It is not.
I disagree with that. It's there's a lot that goes into winning GPPs, but just taking hard stances is just it increases your volatility more than anything if you're taking. And I think you're talking about like day-to-day stances. I guess I don't know. We don't need to get into that much.
Yes. I don't really know how he meant it, but either way, like if you mean it as just like making up arbitrary things in your head, like not stacking Coors and then never stacking Coors, that is certainly not how you win tournaments. If you mean taking hard stances as far as like yes and no, it can help you if you happen to take a stance on a low owned team and they go off. Obviously, that's great. But also, like, if you look at the best tournament players, they're not always just out there playing like 1% owned teams that are really shitty plays and hoping to get lucky. Like they're still playing good plays.
Yeah, and I like when I was doing my doing this solo, and I would look at what the pros did on a given slate. It was like the combos of teams would be like some of the best pros would be so spread out in terms of their ownership, like in terms of teams, like they'd have 4 of this team 5-man stacks, and then 4 of this team, and it just like they don't have like. And this isn't true of all. Like we talked about, Ricky D is an example of someone who sometimes will take hard stances, but even with Ricky D, it's like it depends on the slate. Sometimes he will, sometimes it'll be more spread out. So it's I don't think that is correct. That you,
especially in baseball. I was actually talking to Josh about this the other day. That it's something I think I might change is getting a little bit more flat. Because typically the way that I play, and I think most players play, is more like looking to exploit their opponents and factoring in ownership. And like if you get a team that is grading out as being under owned, you just like start jamming them in. And or like in basketball, football, like if you get a player, a wide receiver, or a basketball player that is projected to be under owned, you just start getting a lot of them. And I think that actually might sort of not be as good in baseball because every team in baseball is still so unlikely to succeed. So like I don't know that I necessarily want to just be jamming in the Marlins as a stack because they have a 7% chance of succeeding and they're only 4% owned. Like, cool, they're going on their own. They're still going to fail so much that I'm just burning money over and over and over. Whereas I think if you play closer, I think like the more I think about it, like maybe if you play closer to optimally in baseball and let the field do their thing, like you're still going to end up under the field on a lot of the most popular teams because the field does play too much of the top projected teams. But like instead of just jamming in 1 or 2 teams that are the most under owned but still really unlikely to succeed in baseball, I think kind of giving yourself chances to win a variety of ways because of the volatility makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, agreed. I think it is of all the sports, it's probably the one that of all the sports I play, I should say, it's the one that I think that I played the flattest. I think it makes the most sense to play the flattest. Although it's tough for me. Like if I'm playing just 20 lineups, I'm a lot more inclined to just choose like 4 or 5 stacks that I'm going to force in. But like,
that's the one. That's the other thing is like I've been playing 20 lineups recently instead of 150. And so it's like, well, that kind of sucks because now I'm playing like 3 total lineups of like, each
your favorite teams. Yeah.
But still, kind of going back and forth on that. I do think that it makes sense in baseball more than anything else, at least to consider sort of like, and again, within each lineup, you want to pay attention to the ownership of the lineup, but like, not necessarily looking to exploit the field so much as to just like play the percentages that you think are correct and know the field's probably going to end up making mistakes somewhere.
Right. Black Main says, is stacking a must in MLB? Yeah, I would say, I mean, you're going to see like every month, you're going to see at least once or twice in the large field GPP, somebody is going to win with an unstacked lineup. Maybe I shouldn't say at least once or twice, but you'll see it from time to time in MLB that the top lineup won't be very stacked. But if you want to be a long-term successful MLB DFS player, then yes, I would say stacking is necessary.
Yeah. So like this is just kind of a weird thing where you have to actually realize what you're trying to do. The optimal lineup in baseball is almost never going to be a 5-man stack. Like optimal is in highest scoring, best lineup you could potentially make, but you're never going to make that lineup. Like if your game plan shouldn't be to make the highest possible scoring lineup because it's just never going to happen. Like it's so low probability for you to do. Stacking, like people a lot of times say like you stack because it increases your ceiling. It really doesn't. Your ceiling is the highest if you just nail every individual hitter that happens to hit 2 home runs, and they're probably not all on the same team. But it makes it so that it just adds correlation. So like you don't have to get like thinking about it like a parlay instead of having to get 8 individual events right by just grabbing 8 different hitters. You're getting 5 from the same game where if that team or same team where if that team does well, they're getting extra at bats. They're facing a pitcher who clearly doesn't, or who doesn't have his best stuff, is giving up runs. Potentially, you're getting the weaker arms in a bullpen because it's not a competitive game and the manager doesn't want to burn his good arms. So like you're adding that correlation. You're actually sacrificing some ceiling, but you're doing it with the knowledge that like unlike a sport like MMA, nobody's building the optimal lineup in baseball. You're not competing against that.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. Like you're not really raising your floor because a stack can just absolutely suck. You're not really raising your ceiling because, as you said, it's all one. But you're raising your likelihood of hitting a ceiling, like hitting like in that 95th percentile plus or something.
Right. Yeah. You're raising the likelihood of having a very good competitive lineup.
Right. All right. We can move on to the second game of the slate, which is Seattle at Boston. We've got George Kirby on the mound for the Mariners, Tanner Houck for the Red Sox. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
Kind of forgot we were doing a show. I was into like baseball strategy.
Getting into the strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I always like to try to trick you into like high stakes type analysis. I guess this is still a little bit more like baseball specific, but through the course of our shows, Adam, I'm going to get enough strategy from you, like general strategy, and I'm going to piece it together and say, hey, I had Adam on as my guest for high stakes. It's going to be great.
Right. Yeah. You'll eventually come back to me like, you can just do the show now because we've already talked through all this stuff like 8 different times.
Or I'll just do that. Yeah.
But yeah, so as far as the pitching here, Kirby is good. But pitching doesn't look particularly interesting here. It looks like the wind's blowing out in Fenway. Should be like 70 to 75 degrees. Really, really surprised by the run totals here. And I feel like there's one of these games like every day where I look at it and I'm just like, this seems crazy high to me. And the way I approach that is I assume that I am wrong and all of the data is right. And I ignore my biases because I think Tanner Houck's a solid pitcher. I think George Kirby's a very good pitcher. Seeing a 4.8 implied run total for the Red Sox against Kirby definitely sort of makes you do a double take. Same for a 5.2 implied run total against Tanner Houck, but especially the Red Sox. But again, I think it's just weather related. And, these are 2 solid offenses in a park that does play up power, especially for righties. So I have a hard time wanting to get to much of either pitcher. Tanner Houck's pulling he's projected for 0.5% ownership. So is Kirby. If you wanted to make a case that George Kirby is just too talented a pitcher to be 1% owned, I wouldn't really argue with you, but realistically, I just think I'm gonna have a hard time getting to it.
Okay. Yeah. Bospro says never playing Coors has merit though because it's perpetually over-owned. I mean, if that is the case, I don't like to just make a hard rule like that. It's usually over-owned. So yeah, I think that if you're going to take a hard stance, it's not the worst hard stance, but there are going to be days where we have it projected for the Rockies or their opponent for 15% ownership with an 18% chance to be in the top stack and an 18% chance to be in the top value stack. Like there are days where it's not over-owned. So, but if you don't have access to the tools, I guess maybe it's a fine approach to take. Whereas I prefer to just look at like, are our tools telling us they're going to be over-owned or under-owned? And then I take, I adjust my approach according to the tools more so. But anyway, we've spent enough time on that topic. What about the bats in this game? Seattle, Boston, any interest?
Yeah, which again is weird because I think both of these pitchers are actually good, and I don't typically like taking hitters against them. But Seattle coming in third in top stack percentage at 8%, 11% chance of being 11% aggregate ownership. They're third in stack score, which factors in value and top stack percentage. So they're looking pretty good. Boston's middle of the pack in stack score, 5% chance to be in the top stack, 4.5% projected ownership, only a 3.5% chance to be in the top value. So they are a little bit more expensive. They do have the more difficult matchup against Kirby as well. Tanner Houck does give up some power to lefties specifically. Not that you have a ton of good left-handed power in the Mariners lineup, and Fenway Park does play up right-handed power more, but Jared Kelenic, Cal Raleigh, both, solid power bats from the left side. obviously you can still play Ty France, Rodriguez, Suarez, Hernandez. They're just, good power hitters with a wall 300 feet away in left field. From the Red Sox side, Kirby really doesn't give up a lot. 127 expected ISO to lefties since last year, 144 to righties. So this is a spot, I think, where it's really tough for this to be actionable information if you're playing a lot of lineups. But I think that, like, ideally, the way that I view this is 5-man stacks from Boston would be like my priority if I'm going to the Red Sox, because you're kind of just hoping that George Kirby doesn't have his best stuff today, has a bad game, and it benefits the entire Red Sox lineup. Because when you look at Kirby, there's nothing about him that you can like target specifically where you're just like, well, he has this weakness and we can exploit that with these Red Sox hitters. It's more so if George Kirby has his good stuff, he still certainly can get unlucky because of the great hitting conditions. But if he has his best stuff, there's not one particular hitter that you're looking at saying like, well, I don't think it's going to matter. When you look at Tanner Houck, he does struggle with lefties. So you can at least, like, I'm not saying that like 5-man stacks for the Mariners aren't good. I like those as well. But at least with the Mariners, like, you could also, like, if you're building one lineup and you have a different 5-man stack, I can at least point to like Kelnick and Raleigh as, these are guys that, even aside from the weather and everything, I would expect to have some success against Houck.
Okay. How would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Mariners 1, Red Sox 2, Kirby 3, Houck 4.
How concerned are you that ChatGPT is going to make it impossible to win at DFS?
Very, actually.
Yeah, I see people brought it up in chat, and you were responding there. Yeah, it does seem like it's something that in a very short amount of time, everybody's going to be using ChatGPT. This game could be much more difficult to win, but who knows? Who knows how long it'll take?
Yeah, I mean, I've already used it to. I can now create, like, so for MMA, like, obviously there's like a finite number of lineups you can make. I've already like used ChatGPT to make it so I can get every single possible MMA lineup in like a minute, and then have those to like go through and figure out which ones I want to play. Like, and I have zero ability to like code or anything. So like people that actually have a background and like know what they're doing and what they're trying to do and aren't going to have the same learning curve as me, like, it's going to make people like me that are technological idiots able to do things that like I couldn't do before, and it's going to make the smart people just even better.
Yeah, just like impossible to beat. They can just, anything that they want to change, they can do it immediately. Yeah, it's going to make it tougher, but I think we've got a little bit of time left, at least, where there's going to be enough bad players. Maybe it'll just be, maybe the field sizes will increase. I don't know. Probably not.
Well, I mean, and this probably isn't, I mean, this is a simplified way of looking at it, I think, but I do view tournaments still as like a pendulum where, years ago it used to be that you could win tournaments just by playing the best projected teams because people didn't have good projections. Then it got to where like you had to use ownership because everybody had good projections, but they weren't using ownership well. And then now it's kind of swinging back to where like using projections is almost better because everybody's using ownership, and it's creating those situations where like the team that is third most likely to succeed ends up being the most popular. So I kind of view it that way, where like there is still something to be said where like if it gets to where all the pros are playing some sort of like if every pro has something built out where they're playing like an optimal strategy, you can start going back towards like exploiting what they're going to play. If they're all playing like an exploitive strategy where they're they're like perfectly using ownership, then you still kind of know what they're going to do, and you can shift back toward using projections more. Like it gets harder and harder, but I do think that like the pendulum aspect of it makes it so tournaments will still at least always have some way you can approach them that maybe create an edge.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. Like for a little while there, I was thinking like just sims, like not even thinking about AI, but like just people who are able to do sims and like making sims public was going to make it unbeatable. But then I'm like, every time I look at it, I'm like, but there are things like you still have to put your own thought into it. So like even the sims, you can't just like, they don't know everything. So it's still based on human error, the human inputs. Now AI changes that somewhat, but AI also doesn't know everything. So I don't know. I think that there's always going to be some sort of an edge, I hope.
Yeah, I just kind of think about it like it's going to make it harder and harder, and it's and different. But like right now, most pros use some version of the same projections. There are definitely some that do their own, but like they're using a lot of the same projections, so you kind of know what they're going to do. If it gets to where everybody is using sims and everything, like the sims are still running based on your projections and stuff. So like you're going to just have everybody's sims spitting out very similar, like this is how you should play. And
Exactly.
you're still gonna be able to like predict how people play and come up with some strategy that can beat that or compete with it at least.
At least that's what we're telling ourselves.
Right.
We'll see. But it seems like that should be the case. Paul says Neil is using ChatGPT to write these scripts. I have never used ChatGPT actually. I wish that I could. All right. Third game of the slate, we've got Milwaukee at St. Louis. Freddie Peralta on the mound for the Brewers. Jack Flaherty for the Cardinals. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
Yes. Four implied run total for both sides. Win looks like blowing in a little bit, nothing too crazy in St. Louis. Flaherty at 7,600. I mean, I really don't know what to make of this guy as a pitcher. He clearly doesn't have the stuff that he used to. So far this season for Flaherty, striking out 22% of hitters. That's solid. 15% walk percentage is awful. 5.66 FIP, awful. 1.4 home runs per 9, not good. His fastball velocity has been all over the place. A reporter asked him after his last start again about his fastball velocity, and he said he's not talking about it anymore. That basically he said that he intentionally changes speeds on his fastball, which there is merit to that. You know, pitchers do that, and it can be successful. I do kind of call bullshit on Jack Flaherty arguing that there are times he would prefer to throw a 90-mile-an-hour fastball compared to a 94-mile-an-hour fastball. But, you know, he says it, whatever. But you've just seen a lot of inconsistency from him since coming back from injury. But that is also accounted for by him being $7,600. So there is still some merit to getting to him. We have him getting 14% ownership right now, 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. I think he's very comparable to Alek Manoah in the way that I think about them. Two pitchers that we know are capable of succeeding in the major leagues. Manoah, we have question marks about just exactly what the hell is going on with him this year. Flaherty, you have the injury, return from injury question marks, but they're both a lot cheaper than they were when they were good. So that is, being accounted for at least a little bit. On the other side, Freddie Peralta's third in top 2 pitcher percentage at 16%, pulling 19% ownership, $9,000 price tag. He is going up against a Cardinals lineup that is pretty balanced in terms of lefty versus righty, but the hitters that I think you're most concerned about, Goldschmidt, Arenado, Contreras, all from the right side, which is good for Peralta. He struck out 26.4% of righties since the start of last season, 127 expected ISO. He's been very good against lefties as well, actually even better. 28% strikeout percentage, 105 expected ISO. If you go back to the 2021 season, 32% strikeout percentage to righties, 29% to lefties. So the point here is Peralta is really good against both sides of the plate, strikes out a lot of guys. It's a dangerous lineup in the sense that they have a lot of name value. It hasn't been a dangerous lineup for most of this year, but either way, Peralta is a good pitcher.
What about the bats?
Not too interested there. St. Louis coming in second from the bottom in stack score, 2% chance of being the top stack, 1% ownership. That's the kind of spot sort of that I was alluding to earlier where like they're going on their own, but they're failing 98% of the time. Do you really want to be saying, oh, yeah, well, I'm just going to get to more St. Louis here because the field's not playing enough of them. So, really tough spot for them. Milwaukee, more middle of the pack against Flaherty. Very similar to the way I view the Yankees, just like Flaherty, similar to how I view Manoah. If you get good Flaherty, Milwaukee isn't a team I would want. If you get bad Flaherty, I love Milwaukee. We obviously don't know which one we're going to get, but medium projections do just sort of drive down how much Milwaukee people are going to get to. 3.5% chance of being the top stack, 4% ownership, but also a 7% chance of being the top value. So they come in middle of the pack in stack score against Flaherty.
Okay, and then how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
I have absolutely no idea. Freddie Peralta 1, I guess Flaherty 2, Brewers 3, Cardinals 4.
Matthew Bellman says the human element of sports makes it harder for AI to completely take over DFS. I agree with that. You disagree with that? I think that makes some sense. That it's like it's different than poker. In that poker, it's like these are the odds. Like you have the exact odds because it is like DFS is based on actual athlete performances. Like there's enough human element that it's probably harder to take over than like some other games, like than most games would be.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not like if I'm using AI and you're not, it's not like you have some way of finding out how the Cardinals batters actually feel today and if they're going to do well. Sure. I can't with AI. Like neither of us can solve that variable and never will be able to. But I can account for a lot of the math and do the best that I can to account for the math using that.
Right.
Kind of similar.
We're already doing.
Right. Like similar to poker. Like it's still a math-based game. Like, yeah, poker, the odds are the odds, but you still have people that have different
True.
tendencies, and that's going to be more difficult to account for.
Yeah, no, that is true that there's a human element of poker too. I'd say there's more of a human element in DFS, but that is true. Like there's no way for us to really take advantage of the human element. It's just I think it makes it harder for it to ever be completely solved. Like the human
Right.
element of DFS just makes it impossible to like actually solve it, which is why there's always going to be ways to win at least.
I think it can be pretty close to solved as far as playing the correct way. There's just always going to be a lot of variance
Yeah,
because of
that's
the
true.
human element.
Right. All right. Atlanta. Actually, before we go on to Atlanta versus Texas, let me take a brief pause to tell you about our sponsor, So Rare MLB, which of course we you've heard about them if you've been watching after the collection of digital trading cards and an NFT based free to play baseball game. I actually just did a little VOD on Sower MLB, so you can check that out as well if you're looking for some strategy tips for the slate this week. But again, if you have not yet signed up for SoRare, you can do so for free. It doesn't cost any money to sign up for SoRare, and when you sign up, they do give you a number of free common cards that you can then enter into contests and use those cards to win other cards, win the limited cards that are actually worth money that you can sell on the marketplace. I think it's a really fun way to play fantasy baseball, and you can't do much better than starting for free and having the opportunity to win prizes that you can sell for real money. I just put the link in the description, so if you're interested in checking out SoRare, please do use the link that I just put into chat. If you're watching this later, you can also just find it in the description of this video. But again, you get free cards when you sign up. They give you a salary cap and certain number of cards valued at various prices. You choose some cards within that salary cap, and then you can play those common cards. And of course, please don't make the mistake that I made of choosing bad cards when you sign up. Spend a little bit of time at least thinking about which cards you want, but then from there you'll have a leg up on the competition in those common contests. And then I, of course, am getting into these limited pro contests because I made such bad choices when I signed up in the common cards. I decided I'm going to get into the money contest. You do have to pay a little bit of money for these limited cards, but for this week, I think one of the best approaches is attacking Coors Field. Once again, we've got the Reds and Rockies in Coors Field. And if you just go to buy and sell manager sales, you can limit yourself to. So I'm playing limited. Depends on, whichever type of contest you want to play. Check that box. You're going to only see the limited cards, and you can actually sort by team. So go to card team, sort it out by Reds, Rockies, choose only the bats under position, and you can find right away you're gonna see that it's pretty cheap to get started. So I actually think that if you are new to SoRare, this is a good week to get started, just because most of the best bats that you're probably going to want to play are in the Scores game, and the most expensive bat is Nick Senzel at $23. I guess Jonathan India up to $20, but most of these bats you can get for under $10 in this Coors slate, 3 games in Coors. So I think that it's a fun slate to attack if you are new to SoRare. $10 for Chris Bryant. Just these all look fairly cheap for a Coors slate. So highly recommend if you haven't signed up for SoRare. I think today is a good day to do it. Of course, this contest does lock in 3 or 4 hours, so you're going to need to do it within the next couple hours if you want to play this slate. Starts in 3 hours 14 minutes. So you do want to get in on it now if you are planning on playing SoRare this week. But again, get yourself some Rockies, some Reds. I think you're going to have a leg up on the competition. So sign up now if you haven't yet signed up for SoRare. We'll move on to the next game, Adam, which is Atlanta at Texas. I'm not seeing a pitcher for Texas. Do you know who that is, Adam?
Let's
see here.
It looks like Cody Bradford, who is not in the player pool.
Okay, so we don't have to worry about Texas pitcher Charlie Morton on the mound for the Braves. Any interest in Charlie Morton?
Yeah, some interest in Morton. Tough matchup against Texas. A little surprised he's pulling 26% ownership, but he is only $8,500, so I guess it does make some sense. Striking out only 22% of hitters this year, 4.06 FIP. Just a pretty solid pitcher. Not as much strikeout success so far this year, but as in previous years, but probably bounces back sooner than later. Going back to the start of last year, 26.5% strikeout percentage to lefties, 27.3% to righties. This year he's at about 24% to lefties, 20 to righties. Dangerous matchup. The Rangers have been a good offense. They do only have about a 4.1 implied run total. They still don't have Corey Seager back. So yeah, dangerous spot, but you're getting an $8,500 salary, so that is sort of offsetting some of the risk.
Okay. And what about the bats in this game?
Definitely interested in the Braves side. Looking at Bradford, 7 starts at AAA this year, 39 and 2/3 innings pitched. This is his first stint above AA. He was okay. 3.55 FIP, struck out 24, like 25% of hitters, walked about 9%. Looks like he was solid in 7 starts at AAA. Who knows how that carries over to the majors? The bat projects him for a 23% strikeout percentage, 4.2 FIP. I've said it before. The bat is typically pretty low on guys that have no major league experience. So I view those numbers as actually pretty favorable for Bradford. But this is still a very high upside Braves lineup against a pitcher making his major league debut. On the one hand, it can be tough because you've never seen the guy before. You don't have a lot of, you don't have any major league scouting on the guy. And, we've said it before, it's not like when you're a kid and you just step in the box, you see the guy throw his warm up pitches and you just start swinging. Like, these guys are so reliant on scouting reports and video and all of that to be able to hit major league pitching. It can make it tough when you're seeing a guy for the first time. They have scouting reports. They know what he throws. They have minor league scouting reports, but not the same in-depth stuff you have when guys have been in the majors. So there is, just sort of added volatility. There's always volatility in these spots, but even more so when you're seeing a guy for the first time making his debut. But that also goes both directions. Some pitchers come up and don't miss a beat. Other guys come up and are, way too amped up and they struggle right out of the gate. So overall, very, very high upside spot for the Braves. They're 5th in stack score. 7.5% chance of being the top stack, 9% projected ownership, only a 2% chance of being the top value. So they are pretty expensive. They're a team where if you're going to them, you're probably utilizing those like Alek Manoah, Charlie Morton, Jack Flaherty type prices to fit them in.
Okay. And how would you rank the 4 sides of this game?
Braves 1, Morton 2, Rangers 3. Somebody said Seager's back tonight. I hadn't seen that. He's not in the projected lineup I'm looking at. I do know he's coming back soon, though, so that is entirely possible. And if he is back, it just makes the spot even scarier for Morton.
Okay. Man, people are really trying to do the whole high stakes episode in one because we got people. Matthew saying now shouldn't really play any contest you can't max anyways.
I actually disagree with that. I used to agree with it, but I disagree with it now.
Yeah, I disagree with it also, but I think that's one of those things that like it's a spot where like great minds differ. Like you see a lot of smart people saying don't play him, and then a lot of smart people saying you can play contests that you don't max enter. You and I think I sent you the article. I think Ed Miller maybe wrote an article about that exact topic, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that he came to the opposite conclusion that it isn't really that much of a negative to not be able to max out a contest.
Yeah, and I'd kind of been thinking about it that way too. And then you sent me the article, and it basically confirmed the way I've been thinking about it. Because like. Yeah. My argument for why you should only play tournaments you can max was always like, basically, that you're at a disadvantage against people that are maxing because like they can, play different, they can play more versions of like the team you're stacking basically, which is true. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about your bottom line. And it doesn't matter if you're playing 150 lineups and I'm playing 10 in the $15 tournament. Yes, of course, you should expect to win the tournament more often than me. But it doesn't change the fact that I am putting in $150 and that's still going to be one of the softest fields because it's the proportion of guys that can put in 150 lineups or the proportion of people playing 150 lineups compared to the field size is going to be lower than when you play, your smaller field stuff. So it's going to, by definition, be a weaker field. My 10 best lineups are still likely to be able to turn a profit in that field. So yes, it's going to take me longer to win the tournament, but I'm still going to be more profitable playing that tournament than playing, than playing a $50 3 max or $150 single entry where the whole field almost is pros and they're all playing their best lineup.
Right. Like at the end of the day, you're not playing against the field. You're playing against yourself to some extent. So it's like playing in the softer field is going to be your biggest advantage ultimately. So yeah, I think that's ultimately where I land is. And then there's also like within individual lineups. So like if one person is playing 150 lineups, you're going to get more like that's obviously the maximum amount of groupthink of like one person possibly and of course it depends on the player, but there are going to be some 150 maxers that are going to all of their lineups are going to be very similar, or they're going to have one thought of like, so we had an NBA. The Josh Hart was a great example. Like none of the 150 maxers want to play Josh Hart, so then they're just completely out of that whole set of player pools. Whereas then there are other people. I don't know. It's you get a lot more.
Yeah.
lot more grouping of lineups. Although there are 150 max to really spread it out too. So I don't know. It's
well, and S&P is right too. It kind of depends what you're talking about. Like if you're going to spend $80, you should probably play 20 entries in the $4.20 max before you
sure.
put a lineup into the $15. But if you're at a point where you're like, all right, I'm maxing, like I'm playing $400 today. So I'm going to max out the $4. And this, I'm ignoring like micro stake stuff because I don't know what exists because I can't see it. But so like let's say you have to play, you can't play micro stake stuff, and you're going to spend $400 in entries. I would argue that you should be playing 20 lineups in the $4, and then as many lineups in the $15 until you get to 400, as opposed to being like, well, I'm going to play the $100 single entry instead of any lineups in the $15.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation topic. I suppose we should continue moving on. Adam, you and I, we should really get into it someday on the High Stakes podcast. All right. Next game we have here, Cubs at Astros. Jameson Taillon on the mound for the Cubs. Framber Valdez for the Astros. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
Yeah, Valdez 10-7, not a great strikeout pitcher. Doesn't strike out guys at a high enough clip that typically warrant that $10,700 price tag, but he is really, really good at getting ground balls. He has actually been better at getting strikeouts this year, striking out 27%. We'll see if that continues. In the past, he's been like a 22, 23% strikeout guy, but he can go deep in the games. He does get a lot of ground balls. This year, like I said, striking out more guys. He struck out 26.7% of righties this year. Throwing his curveball 30% of the time to righties, change up 15%. Last year, he threw his curveball 32, change up 11. So I don't see anything really different in the way he's using his secondary pitches. So I don't really know if they just improved or if it's just small sample size why the strikeout percentage has gone up, but it has. And, we are a month and a half into the season, so I think you can read into that at least a little bit. But either way, the thing with Valdez is always just, he's so good at limiting power. 292 expected WOBA to righties since last year, 265 to lefties. This year it's 297 to righties. 345 to lefties is weird, but also very small sample there. So not really reading into that. He is first in top two pitcher percentage by a pretty decent margin at 26%, pulling 36.5% ownership. He just looks good. Jameson Taillon on the other side, pulling 3% ownership at 7,500. Tough matchup against Houston. Not a great strikeout pitcher. I do think that in large field tournaments, you can use him potentially as a pivot. Like if you are playing a lineup, the Braves were the team I used a minute ago as the example of a team whose pricing probably forces you into like the Alek Manoah, Jack Flaherty range. But the Braves also weren't really that popular. But if you're playing a team that is going to be popular and you also need pitching in that Flaherty, Manoah range, Taillon would make sense as a guy where you're just saying like, look, I don't have a lot of confidence in him. I don't like the matchup, but he's getting a fraction of the ownership that these other two guys that I also don't have confidence in are getting. So he's playable in that sense, but not somebody I'd like really targeting.
Right. Redsko says, but the winning score in single entry contests is considerably lower than the 20 and 150 max tournaments. I think that's just because they're smaller. Like the single entry, there's just a lot fewer lineups. It's not because like the field, because of the field, it's just because like if you have a contest that has 30,000 entries versus 5,000, the one with 30,000 entries is going to end up being higher, but you're also going to win a lot more money when you win those contests.
The cash lineup in the single entry is typically going to be higher. The winning lineup is going to be lower.
Okay. Yeah.
And like, I mean, that's something else. Like three, I always phrase it as it's more difficult to cash in higher stake small field. It's easier to get first place just because you don't have to beat that many people. But like you have to keep in mind, you're not comparing apples to apples when you look at like the top score, because it's not like you get to go into the single entry and play 150 lineups and you just have to beat that top score. You're playing one. Like you have to beat that top score with the one lineup you choose. Like it's also much, much harder for you to beat that score.
Right. Good. Well said. Well said. All right. Bats. Cubs versus Astros. Any interest in the bats?
Not a ton. If you're going to hitting here, I think I would go to the Astros just because it's the Astros and Taillon's not as good as Jameson Taillon. Or Taillon's not as good as Valdez, rather. Since the start of last year, 191 expected ISO to lefties. If you are singling out bats from the Astros, it shouldn't surprise anybody that you're looking to Alvarez and Tucker first. But yeah, decent stack there. They are middle of the pack in stack score, 3.5% chance of being the top stack, 3.5% ownership. But if I go to one side, it would be Houston.
Okay, sounds good. And how would you rank the four sides of the game?
Valdez 1, Astros 2, Taillon 3, Cubs 4.
All right. Let's move on. Let's do the Coors game before we take a look at lineup generator, because I imagine it's going to be relevant when we look at lineup generator. We've got the Reds at the Rockies. Hunter Green on the mound for the Reds. Connor Siebold for the Rockies. Playing any pitchers in Coors, Adam?
No.
All right. How about the bats?
Yes. Bats and Coors typically going to be happy to get there. But this, I mean, obviously it comes back to what the rest of your lineups are going to look like. You have a 5.7 implied run total for the Reds, 5.3 for the Rockies, mid 60s weather. Looks like there is a little bit of rain around, but shouldn't impact this game. One thing that does stand out as a value is that Matt McLain for the Reds is expected to make his major league debut tonight. He is $2,000 on DraftKings for unknown reasons. The projected lineup that I'm looking at has him batting ninth. I don't know where he'll hit, but this is clearly going to be a very, very strong value at AAA this year. 38 games played, 16.8% walk percentage, 20% strikeout percentage, 362 ISO, 193 WRC plus. This guy can hit. He's 2K flat in Coors Field. Just a mispricing there. Obviously, if he's hitting higher in the order, then even better. But individually, he needed to be called out. Other than that, though, this is sort of your normal stuff in Coors where you're going to get a bunch of ownership coming in. The Reds are pulling 17% ownership. The next highest owned team on DraftKings is San Diego at 11%. The Reds are also the most likely team to succeed. 15% chance of being the top stack. 85% chance of not being the top stack for anybody that can't do that math. But the next highest team in top stack percentage is Arizona at 10%. So you're talking about the Reds being 1.5 times more likely than any other individual team to be the top stack. Also, basically 1.5 times, a little over 1.5 times as owned as any other team. So everything considered, their ownership looks pretty much where it should be. Not really going over owned, not really going under owned. That tells me that they're not bad plays, but within that lineup, you still have to find ways to be different. Whether that's using Jameson Tyon at low ownership, as just thinking of him because I mentioned him as a pitching pivot. Finding ways it can be a low-owned secondary stack, whatever it is. The Reds' ownership by itself, I don't think is problematic, but you do need to find ways to just not be playing a super popular lineup top to bottom.
Yep, makes sense. And how would you rank the four sides of the game?
Reds 1, Rockies 2, Green 3, Siebold 4. As far as Green goes, he is a very, very good strikeout pitcher, and we do know that the Rockies lineup isn't particularly good. So I did say I didn't have interest in the pitching here. This is sort of like when Freddie Peralta faced the Rockies. If you're going to take a pitcher in Coors, take somebody like Hunter Green. He's only getting 6% ownership, 12% chance of being a top 2 pitcher. That said, I don't think I get there much, but he is at least like playable, as opposed to most of the time you just completely write guys off. Right. He does give up some power too, though. And so there is upside for the Rockies. They're getting 6% ownership, 7% chance of being the top stack, is 5th highest on the slate. So they're going to be probably like 1/3 is owned as the Reds. Their implied run total isn't that much lower than the Reds. It is certainly a more difficult matchup, but still plenty of upside here. So Reds 1, Rockies 2, Green 3, Siebold 4.
All right, sounds good. So now that we've looked at the Coors slate, I think it's a good time to jump in and look at lineup generator just briefly as we can make it. I will once again put the link in chat. So if you want to sign up for lineup generator today, you can still get it for 50% off your first week. So it's going to be just $4.50 for your first week of lineup generator. Still just $9 after that first week as well. Still very cheap for a tool that is giving you lineups that have already been vetted. These are all plus EV lineups. You're not going to get anything in lineup generator that has not been vetted as a plus EV lineup in the Stokastic sim. So these are all lineups that over the course of 10,000 slates, you're going to win money. Of course, that doesn't mean you're going to win money every day, but these are all lineups that should win money if you play it long term. So very cool new product. Just came out last week, still brand new, but we've already seen some success with it. Adam, I'm going to do all stack types once again for today. What do you think? We've got a Coors slate. Do you still just want to do a balance build here?
Yeah, see how it works out, because I'm actually interested to see what it'll give you, because I think it should still be giving you Coors bats and then finding ways to differentiate, but we'll see.
All right, so our very first stack, we've got Cincinnati and Arizona. So we do have Cincinnati being one of the Coors. Let's see, 1, 2, 3. Looks like it's a 5-3 Arizona with Cincinnati as the 3-man secondary stack.
I like that.
Low owned Pablo Lopez. Man, he's only 6% owned for the Twins today at 10,100. Freddie Peralta in there at 19%. So they kind of balance out some of that. It's a fairly chalky lineup in terms of the bats, although Pavin Smith only 3% owned. But most of the bats here relatively high. Oh man, Christian Walker only 5%. All right, so we actually have kind of a lower owned Arizona stack.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I really like this team. We hadn't talked about them yet, but we have Arizona second in top stack percentage. But they are, of the top 4 teams, they're the lowest owned. You have Cincinnati 1, Arizona 2, Seattle 3, San Diego 4. All three, Cincinnati 17% owned, San Diego 11, Mariners 11, Diamondbacks coming in at 8. Like you said, Pavin Smith low owned, Christian Walker low owned. And I've talked on these shows before too about, it's not like I don't go in forcing it, but a lot of times when you get slates like this where you have a team like the Reds that offer a ton of value and are like the highest projected offense, I don't necessarily want to just not have them, but using 2 or 3 of them with a lower owned main stack is a way that it typically ends up shaking out for me. So I really like the way this lineup looks. It looks like something I would build, which makes me feel good.
yeah, and it goes back to what you're saying. Like, you can still play Coors bats even if they're going to be expensive. It just means that you need to, build the rest of your roster around it, which of course Lineup Generator is doing for you. As you said, this one looks really good. It's a nice balance of, like, we've got some low owned bats in here. This lineup looks like it's going to project really well. So that's a really nice lineup. We're going to keep that one. All right, second lineup we see. So we have Cincinnati. Once again, this looks like it's a 5-3 Cincinnati Seattle stack. Yep, 5-3 Cincinnati Seattle. You get Julio Rodriguez in there, Teoscar Hernandez, both under 10% owned, along with Cal Raleigh, just over 10%. The Cincinnati bats, even the Cincinnati bats, and we get Nick Senzel at 7.5% ownership, not super chalky. And then we've got Alex Wood at 7,100, 2% projected ownership. Merrill Kelly, 33% projected ownership. How would you rate this one relative to the last lineup, Adam?
I like this one too. So Wood is facing the Phillies. Not a great matchup, but good park, and it's just one of those spots. Sort of like the example I used when we talked about Coors was Jameson Taillon, but Wood's the same thing. He's not popular because he's got a pretty tough matchup against the Phillies. There's other pitchers that are going to project better, like Manoah and Flaherty, for example. But if you were to throw like a Manoah or a Flaherty into this lineup, then you're just adding another 15 to 20% on guy. And that's not really what you want. Whereas you go to somebody like Alex Wood and you're just saying like, all right, his median outcome isn't as good as these other pitchers, but it's not that far off, and he's going to beat them often enough. This is a way that I can differentiate. So I like this lineup quite a bit too. So it's the full Cincinnati stack and then going to Seattle. So you're still pairing 2 of the top stacks. Cincinnati 1 in top stack percentage, Seattle 3. You're pairing 2 pretty popular and, likely to succeed stacks, but the ownership isn't too crazy because you're still getting individually relatively low owned bats with Rodriguez at 8%, with Hernandez at 8%, Senzel at 7.5%. So you're offsetting some of that ownership there. You're offsetting a lot with Alex Wood. This is a lineup that, I talk a lot about paying attention to the individual hitter ownerships. Like we always talk about aggregate ownership for an offense when we talk about the top stacks tool, but that can be a little bit misleading because it's factoring in all of the hitters and not looking at it at an individual level. It's like you can stack the Reds, but if you're including Nick Senzel at 7%, that's offsetting some of that ownership. The Mariners are popular, but Rodriguez and Hernandez aren't that popular individually. Right. So I think it's a really, really good lineup.
It does look really good. And this is a spot where I might consider like, okay, I'm using just 48,800 in salary. You can go in and swap out. So this is a spot where we've got Alex Wood at 2%. I wonder if, I might think about like, do I want to swap him out for probably not Hunter Green in Coors, Tanner Houck, Alek Manoah? I guess Alek Manoah. There are places you could swap out, but then you're just going to get much higher ownership. Right. So it nicely balances like how chalky your lineup is with how likely it is to succeed. So you could, if you don't trust Alex Wood, you want to go in, swap him out, you can certainly do that with any of these other pitchers up to 8,300. But there's a reason I think that we have it set up as it is as well. The reason this lineup came out as plus EV might be in part because you get Alex Wood solo owned. So, think about that. If you wanted to, if you're playing a different type of contest where you maybe don't need to hit the highest ceiling, maybe then I'd think about swapping out Alex Wood, for example. But in general, it's making you lineups that are going to be plus EV in the largest field stuff.
Yeah, and like SMP mentioned, a potential pitch count for Wood. You can go to like Jameson Taillon. It's the same play. You're just hoping that a decent pitcher happens to have success. You're not necessarily expecting it, but like, yeah, if you're worried about like if you had this lineup and you're like, I don't believe that Alex Wood's ceiling is as high as as it normally would be. Like just turn it into Jameson Taillon at 2% owned. You have the same lineup basically.
Yeah, and I just did that. So we still got a 2% owned Jameson Tyone here. So yeah, have the same lineup there after making the swap, essentially same ownership.
And also, as far as the money it's leaving on the table, this is a good example of why, like, obviously you want to pay attention to it in baseball. You want to make sure that you're not just playing like garbage lineups. But
Right.
like you in a lineup like this, you shouldn't be worried that you're leaving, $800 or $1,200 or whatever. Like Matt McClain is 2K, but he should be like 3K or 3,500.
Right.
You don't want to not play lineup simply because DraftKings screwed up pricing.
Right. It's different from NBA because in NBA,
Right.
like you can almost always upgrade. Now we're getting to smaller slates where it's not as relevant, but like a full NBA slate, typically if you are leaving more than like $600 on the table, like you're making a mistake. Like there are ways you can upgrade your lineup substantially. Whereas MLB, it's like that. It's not the case at all because even the best hitters can fail. All right. Let's look. We'll look at one more. And then maybe I'll just save through these. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna. All right, so now we got, okay, here's the first one that doesn't have Coors. So it does give you some lineups that are not Coors on this slate as well. Seattle and Arizona, or it looks like this is a full 5-man Seattle stack with then Arizona, San Diego, Atlanta. So it's a 5-0 stack here with Framber Valdez and Alek Manoah. So you're playing some decent arms here. Not a super high owned stack, as you can see here. Yeah, right in the middle in terms of chalkiness and contrarian. Close to the high odds of optimal. I like this lineup too, Adam. What do you think of this one?
Yeah, Seattle again, one of the more popular, or one of the teams more likely to succeed, and they are one of the more popular teams on the slate. But at an individual level, it's still not that crazy. The only guy getting a ton of ownership here is JP Crawford at 17% because he's likely leading off as a sub 3K shortstop. No problems there. You're balancing it out with some relatively low owned one offs. Not that they're unowned, but they're strong plays. Acuna 10%, looks good. Cam at 9% looks fine. Fletcher's fine at 4%. And it's and doing something like that, like you can see the way that this is working, and it just goes hand in hand with what we talk about all the time from a lineup building standpoint. This lineup, you get popular pitchers. You get two of the better projected pitchers in Valdez and Manoah because you don't really have much to worry about in terms of your ownership going to bats. When you're going to the Reds, then you have to be more creative with your pitching. Like it all works together.
Right. Yeah. And again, lineup generator giving you these lineups are nicely balanced for you, so you can see what winning lineups look like. You can play these lineups. Again, I put the link is in chat if you have not already signed up for it. Deegan Wittig, I don't know, says, "Hi guys, I subscribe to you. Thank you for subscribing to us, Deegan. I don't think you will regret it." And again, you can check out lineup generator for just $4.50 for your first week. It's a new product. This is probably the time to get in on it when it is brand new. And you can, get ahead of the field. Once the field gets here, once everybody's playing it, maybe you won't have such a huge advantage. But for right now, not a lot of people using lineup generator, and it is just showing you how to make good lineups on any given slate. Really cool tool.
Yeah.
You should definitely check it out.
Yeah. Speaking of things that will make DFS harder as more people
Yeah.
use it.
Exactly. That's the other thing. It's like AI. It's like, yeah, it'll make it harder, but like we're kind of already doing what you
Right.
would want AI to do with like the lineup generator. So I don't know how much more difficult it's going to be. We're already getting to the point where like, yeah, we've got these tools that show you exactly what plus EV lineups look like. So
Right.
we're getting there
Basically,
already.
like we have smart people like Sean that can already build the things that I will end up using
Right.
ChatGPT to
Exactly.
build. And so like it's already here. It's just like Sean and those guys already know how to do it, and I'll learn eventually.
Yep. Exactly. All right, next game on the slate, we've got Arizona at Oakland. Merrill Kelly on the mound for the D-backs. Drew Rucinski for the A's. Adam, any interest in these pitchers?
Lineup generator has FanDuel too, right?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Bill Miner asked in chat. I was like, I'm pretty sure, but yeah.
Yeah.
So yes, to answer that question. Which game?
The
A's.
Diamondbacks A's.
Yeah. So it's in Oakland. Good pitchers park. I'm not really interested in getting to Rucinski here. We don't really know what to make of him as a major league pitcher since he was in Korea for a couple of years, but the expectation is that he's not going to be good, and the results so far are not good. 4.5% strikeout percentage against righties so far is impressively bad. Only 156 pitches thrown, but still insanely bad. Lefties striking out 13.8% of the time, 179 expected ISO. He's been decent at limiting power, 141 to righties, 179 to lefties, but just not missing bats. facing a D-backs lineup that has plenty of speed, plenty of power upside. They are relatively expensive with Marte coming in at $5K, Carroll at $5,200, $4,600 for Rojas, $4,500 for Walker. After that, though, it gets cheap. So you can use the bottom of the order to offset some of those expenses at the top. I know in the lineups that we just used a lineup generator for, you saw Pavin Smith show up, you saw Dominic Fletcher show up. They're both pretty cheap towards the bottom of the order. Gabby Moreno is a decent enough hitting catcher, solid prospect. He's 2,800. Don't mind getting there. So Diamondbacks certainly look good. 5.4 implied run total. They are second in top stack percentage. I mentioned when we were doing the lineup generator that in terms of aggregate ownership, they look really good because they're the only team in the top 4 in terms of top stack percentage that is getting less than 10% aggregate ownership. So definitely like getting to them. Like getting to Merrill Kelly as well. Second in top 2 pitcher percentage, 18% chance of being a top 2 pitcher, 32% projected ownership, but just a good matchup for him against Oakland. He's a solid enough pitcher, not a great strikeout guy by any stretch, but so far this year he is at 25.5%. I think you probably see that come down as the year goes on, but so far 3.87 FIP, 25.5% K percentage, good park to pitch in, bad offense. I like both. I like the Arizona side of this game.
Okay. Adam, while you go over the bats in this game, I am just going to click back into it and let people take a look at the lineup generator for FanDuel. We're not going to do analysis of the FanDuel lineups, but I'm just going to click through them so that we can kind of show it a little bit. But tell me about your level of interest in the bats in this Arizona-Oakland game.
Yeah, so definitely interested in the Arizona side. Like I said, going under-owned, but the nice thing is that you can just go to different parts in the lineup. The guys that you really want to get to are Rojas, Marte, Carroll, Walker, Gurriel. But just having Pavin Smith, Fletcher, Moreno as cheaper guys that aren't bad that you can pay down for, that's pretty nice. On the other side for the A's, I mean, Merrill Kelly is getting 32% ownership, so there's some interest in getting to Oakland, I guess, but I don't think I'll really get there. The park sucks. They suck. Kelly's not a bad pitcher. 145 expected ISO to righties so far this year. 159 to lefties. If you go back to last year, 180 to lefties, 128 to righties. If you were really looking for one bat against Kelly, you're looking for left-handed power. That's mostly non-existent for Oakland. JJ Bleday would be the first pick, I guess. Like if you told me I had to pick one guy to hit home run from Oakland today, Bleday would be my first guess. Rooker would be second. But it's really hard to point to anything Oakland hitter-wise that I really like. If you're going there, it's purely just saying, well, hopefully they hit well against a 32% owned pitcher, but probably not going to be my approach today.
Okay. And how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Kelly 1, Diamondbacks 2, A's 3, Rucinski 4.
All right. 3 games left. So, okay. We got Kansas City at San Diego. Brad Keller on the mound for the Royals. Michael Wacha for the Pods. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
Wacha is 6th in top 2 pitcher percentage, 13%, pulling 23% ownership. He's just another guy in this mix with Alek Manoah, with Jack Flaherty, where it's a really useful price point. Wacha's not a great pitcher. He's not a bad pitcher. He's kind of just there. He's striking out 18.5% of hitters this year, 4.13 FIP. For the price point, that's all fine. You're not excited about it. You're not upset about it. It's just, it is what it is. It's going to help, build your lineups. I will say that the more we talk through this slate and the more we talk about all the guys in this price range getting ownership, the more I actually am sort of interested in Hunter Green, because he does have really, really good strikeout stuff, and these guys don't. Like these guys all have better matchups than Green in terms of they're not pitching in Coors Field, but Hunter Green has struck out 29% of hitters this year, and he's just going to be owned like 1/3 to 1/4 as often as Alek Manoah against the Yankees and Michael Wacha, who strikes out like 10. His strikeout percentage is like 10 points lower than Green. So I am kind of talking myself into maybe taking some more shots at Hunter Green at low ownership. But that being said, Michael Wacha does project as a good point per dollar value. 3.6 implied run total for Kansas City is certainly nothing that you're going to be too scared of. On the other side, I'm not looking to go to Keller against the Padres. Doesn't have much strikeout stuff, but then also has a really tough matchup against the Padres. So have a 5.4 implied run total.
Is Hunter Green more of a fastball pitcher or
Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like fastball pitchers, Coors doesn't matter quite as much.
Right. Like Coors still matters in that you have the altitude, the ball's going to fly, you have the massive
if you hit the ball,
so stuff falls in.
Yep.
But yeah, Hunter Green's a very good strikeout pitcher that throws extremely hard. He's a fastball slider guy. That's what you want in Coors Field in terms of it's going to be less impacted by altitude. His pitches are going to play more similar, more true to what they normally do than guys that are coming in with like big curveballs and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. Any interest in the bats? Kansas City, San Diego.
Yeah, San Diego looks good. Keller just doesn't miss a lot of bats. He's not horrible at limiting power, but the Padres just have a lot of power in their lineup. Since the start of last year, 157 expected ISO to lefties, 143 to righties for Keller. So far this year, 190 to lefties, 110 to righties. Again, nothing that is horrible. Juan Soto seemingly getting it together maybe, but he's 5,300. Certainly happy to keep playing him. Tatis is great. Machado is great. You have a very inexpensive Jake Cronenworth probably hitting second. That looks like a good value. Padres as a stack coming in fourth in stack score, 7% chance of being the top stack, 11% ownership, but also a 5.5% chance of being the top value. So relatively inexpensive. They look pretty good. On the other side against Waka, I never mind getting to KC because the top of the order is so interesting. Like Bobby Witt is just always going to be one of your highest upside shortstops. Vinny Pasquantino is just apparently never going to be correctly priced. Like he's just pretty cheap at 4,200. Salvador Perez is, always a high upside catcher. MJ Melendez did lose his catcher eligibility, so that makes him a little bit less valuable since he's outfield only, but he's still pretty cheap at 3,700. Nick Prado has been hitting well, first base outfield at 2,800. There is talent in this Kansas City lineup, and Michael Wacha is not a great pitcher. So, like I kind of mentioned on the previous game, you could, I guess, make a large field case for Oakland going against a popular Kelly. If I were stacking against one of these popular pitchers, I would go to Kansas City before Oakland. I think Kansas City is more in line with like the Yankees for me, where there is talent here. They're facing a pitcher who's popular because he's decent, but also just because there's not a lot of stuff to be confident in on the slate. So I don't mind taking some shots, especially at the top of the order for KC.
All right. How would you rank the four sides of the game?
Padres 1, Waka 2, KC 3, Keller 4.
Red Skills pointed out that you're going to be able to ask GPT things like which baseball players have birthdays today, who lives the closest to the stadium. We're all going to be able to play just like Sean V in the future. All right. Next game, we've got Philadelphia at San Francisco. Bailey Falter on the mound for the Phillies. Alex Wood for the Giants. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
So Alex Wood, S&P brought it up when we were talking about it before. There are questions on how deep he's going to go into this game. He threw 46 pitches in his rehab start. He only went one inning on Friday. I'm not worried about that. That's basically just his bullpen session took place on the field instead of in the bullpen. Like guys, starting pitchers throw during the week. They don't just sit around for 5 days. So I'm not worried about that. Like I'm not viewing that as he could only throw 31 pitches. I'm viewing it as they wanted him to throw one inning for essentially his bullpen session. But at the same time, it would be surprising to see him go out here and throw like 90 pitches or something. Right. So there does seem like a pretty good chance that he ends up, if he gets 5 innings, the Giants are happy kind of thing. So I do think that, and it's sort of like I mentioned, like pivot, moving him maybe to Tyone in that one lineup we generated. I do think that the upside for Wood might be a little bit muted just because even if he's pitching well, he's probably not going to be allowed to go that deep into this game. Also not a great matchup. So low owned pitcher, 7,100. If you want to get him here and there and just hope he goes 5 innings, I think that's reasonable. But I would typically prefer to find somebody that I think, if they're pitching well, can go more than 5 innings. On the other side, looks like we have Connor Brogdon opening, Bailey Falter following. Makes me not want to get to either of them.
Okay. How about the bats?
Not too interested in hitting here either. Park isn't great. It's league average in terms of park factor for run scoring, but towards the bottom for home runs. And obviously, especially on DraftKings, we know that home runs win tournaments. On FanDuel, it's always a little bit more interesting getting here just because, again, it's not a bad park for runs in general, just for home runs. And FanDuel weights home runs a little bit less. They weight runs, RBIs a little bit more. So makes it look a little bit better, but not an ideal spot for either team either. San Francisco, 3.2% chance of being the top stack. They are pretty cheap, so they have that working for them. On the other side, Phillies, 4.5% chance of being the top stack. Both sides are projected to go a little bit under-owned when you factor in top stack plus top value, but neither one looks particularly good to me.
All right, and how would you rank the 4 sides of the game?
Probably nothing. I guess Giants, then Phillies, then Wood, then Phillies pitching, but it's a lot of just stuff I don't really like.
All right, skip the game. All right, final game of the slate. We've got the Twins at the Dodgers. Pablo Lopez on the mound for the Twins. Noah Syndergaard for the Dodgers. Any interest in these pitchers, Adam?
A little bit in Lopez. You mentioned the low ownership coming into him. This is sort of the Hunter Green play. I think it's actually very comparable to the Hunter Green play. Pablo Lopez is 4th in top 2 pitcher percentage at 14%. He's only getting 6% ownership. It's very, 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 very tough to pay $10,100 for a pitcher against the Dodgers because the Dodgers are so good. Pablo Lopez does have the highest strikeout percentage on this slate at 31.2%. He has a 3.26 xFIP. He's a very good pitcher. Now, is he likely to go out there and dominate the Dodgers? No. And you do have a bunch of competent pitchers that are less expensive, but it does just strike me as a spot where if you have a team that is popular and also pretty cheap, and we know that we do because you have the Reds who are pretty cheap in Coors, getting the most ownership, but also with the highest top value percentage. You have all this ownership coming into Framber Valdez for $600 more. I clearly prefer Framber Valdez, but when you're thinking in terms of like a specific lineup, if you have a popular red stack and then maybe you have a relatively popular secondary stack or relatively popular one-offs with those Reds, you can solve a lot of that by going to Pablo Lopez and saying, hopefully he beats Framber Valdez. Hopefully he beats, the Michael Wacha type guys. And you're just sort of by yourself there. And he certainly can, like I said, highest strikeout percentage on the slate. So I think he's very, very comparable to Green. Green obviously at a different price point, but in that their chances of success are higher than their ownership. They are the two best strikeout pitchers on this slate. And they're getting 5 and 6% ownership simply because of their matchup / in Green's case where he's pitching. It's obviously scary, but I just keep coming back to like, I don't feel good about Alek Manoah or Michael Wacha or any of these other guys either. It's just, yes, they're facing teams that aren't as good as the Dodgers and they're not pitching in Coors, but all of these guys have pretty big red flags. So there's certainly a part of me that is very interested in getting to 5% owned guys that actually have the highest strikeout percentages on the slate.
Makes sense. And what about the bats in this game?
Not a lot to like. The Dodgers, we talk about it a lot. They're the better the pitcher they face, the lower their ownership. So it kind of just, ends up like if you have like a flow chart, it's kind of like, are the Dodgers popular? Yes. Are they facing a bad pitcher? Yes. Play the Dodgers. Are the Dodgers facing a good pitcher? Yes. Are they popular? No. Play the Dodgers. You can sort of just get to play the Dodgers no matter what the situation is. But it is a relatively difficult matchup. 3% projected ownership coming into them. They're relatively expensive as well. Minnesota, middle of the pack in stack score, 4.5% chance of being the top stack, but also a 6.5% top value percentage. Syndergaard doesn't miss a lot of bats. He does still do a pretty good job keeping the ball on the ground, keeping it in, from being hit for home runs. But you do have a pretty cheap team with a lot of upside. Gallo's 4,100, Kirilloff's up with MPE. He's 2,800. The only hitter in the Twins projected lineup north of $4,500 is Buxton at 5,200. So you do get some talented bats here for pretty cheap. Purely tournament offenses, I think. Yep. Neither one's getting a lot of ownership. You're kind of just hoping that the opposing pitcher doesn't have his best stuff, but you're not looking at either side and saying, oh yeah, I love this spot because XYZ, because you don't.
All right. And then how would you rank the four sides of the game?
Lopez, the Dodgers, and the Twins are all very comparable to me in that they're not particularly likely to succeed, but they are going on their own. Syndergaard to me is the fourth.
All right. I was so excited about lineup gender. I haven't even told you guys yet about the deal that we have going on with BetMGM. So real quickly, I'll tell you, but it is a great deal. If you have not yet signed up for BetMGM and you live in a legal betting state, you really need to get on it now because this is a fantastic deal. Get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and your first bet covered up to $1,000 paid back in bet credits when you sign up, make a deposit, and make your first paid wager at BetMGM. Click the link in the description or use promo code PLATINUMSUB to take advantage of this offer. Again, if your first bet loses, you'll get paid back in-site credits equal to the amount of that first wager, up to $1,000. Great deal there. And then, of course, you get the free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum as well. Reminder, though, the legal age for gambling in most states is 21 plus. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Adam, we've gone through all of the games on the slate. If you're playing a 3 max contest, you want to go 3 different stacks. Which 3 stacks are you going to?
Probably Reds, Arizona, and Rockies.
Favorite 3 pitchers?
Valdez, Kelly, Peralta. In tournaments, though, I do like, if you need to save ownership, pivoting to Lopez or Hunter Green. I think it's a way you can save ownership. You're losing a little bit in the way of projection, but you're not actually losing much in the way of ceiling because they're so good at getting strikeouts.
All right. 3 favorite pitchers?
Still Valdez, Kelly, Peralta.
Already asked you that?
Yeah.
All right. Home run pick.
Okay, no Coors. Guess I should get to the games that are on the slate. Man, there really weren't. This is a weird slate. There's not a lot of good pitching. There's not a lot of like this guy's garbage pitching either.
Yeah.
I will go with Alvarez.
Alvarez, who is currently, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 7th in terms of home run odds in the top batters tool.
I'll take that considering I wasn't looking at it.
Yeah, that's not bad for just picking a player. I'm going to go with higher odds here. I'm going to go to my guy. Byron Buxton is number 1 home run odds. Kind of surprises me.
That does surprise me a lot.
Yeah. In LA, but yeah, he's number 1 with a 33% chance of hitting a home run today. I'll take those odds when I can bet on a Twins player. So I'm going to go with Byron Buxton as my home run pick today. Adam, any final thoughts?
I will have baseball. How many basketball games are there today?
There is 0. You will be on MLB Deeper Dive. I was just looking at it.
So I'll have baseball
with
article
Lofty
out shortly, Bet Pro video shortly. I'll be back for MLB Deeper Dive at 5 before I go watch Shohei Ohtani and Grayson Rodriguez pitch against each other.
Oh, nice. You're going to the game?
Yeah.
Nice. Have fun there. Again, guys, please do like the video if you haven't already. It really does help us out a lot. We really appreciate it. I will be back on MLB Live Before Lock following Adam tonight. So we'll be doing 2 MLB shows tonight. So we've gone from 0 often to now 2 games for the night slate as well following this one. So looking forward to seeing you guys there. Good luck tonight.